Hey, what up you beauties? Welcome to story time of rehabilitation. We're gonna start with something I completely forgot to do for the hospital section. This was my window view. I had a parking lot to look out of, and let me tell you, to just look at cars coming in and naming cars as they come in, see sunset, was awesome. I loved it. But as far as rehab went down, this is what I was looking out of. And this window I thought was actually pretty cool because you saw snow accumulation, there was a construction yard around the corner that you could see big trucks moving around. I was basically just looking at simple things to entertain myself because you know what? Gotta do what you gotta do. But anyways, let's get to it guys in terms of how rehab was broken down. I had occupational therapy, physiotherapy, speech therapy, and let's get right to it. We're gonna start with occupational therapy, and that was one heck of a therapy. I thought it was really strange initially, to be quite honest. I was stunned by the things that we were doing. We were playing the matching cards game where you take a deck of cards, you pile them all on like a table face down, and you flip them over and you try to match them. If you get the match, you keep it. If you don't, they stay there, but you're trying to remember that they're there. But that was cool. I was like, sure, sounds good. One day we ended up playing darts. We were doing puzzles. There was a testing day which went over a puzzle again. You went over memorizing pictures. We went over a route that you had to keep in mind and memorize. So he would basically show you the route, you'd do the route, you'd go sit down, you'd do some stuff for a little while longer, and then you'd go back out to do the route. And then after doing that route, you'd be going back to do the same puzzle. And it's like, oh man, like okay. There was just a lot of like short-term memory pulls, but making sure that it was working well and was proficient. At least that's the way I was looking at it. One of the biggest things that I found as far as occupational therapy that was hilarious, and that's when part 3 will come into play. I had to make things in the kitchen to ensure that I was safe enough in the kitchen and was okay to be home and out and about in the real world, but we'll get to that soon enough, not to worry. That'll be part 3 of 3. And physical therapy. This one I was so excited for. I was like, yeah, maybe it's gym class. Nope, not at all. So basically the first class I had was walking back and forth in the gym. You had 6 minutes, see how long it takes you, or not how long, see how much distance you can get in 6 minutes. On that one, I finished horribly. I finished in the bottom 25%, and I was like, ugh, don't watch me, it's okay. But here's the thing, the next test I did was basically a bunch of methods of walking with bags, walking and looking one way, walking backwards, walking and hopping, a bunch of different ways. And the total of the test was out of 96. What they wanted to see you finish within was 70 to 80 was what they would have been like happy with. I got 95. I lost 1 mark for walking too slowly. So I absolutely slaughtered that one by comparison. Now, where this one got really funny is after that test, she was basically like, okay, well, I guess we don't really need to do this stuff anymore, but you should stay moving, which is totally fair. You're stuck in a hospital, you don't want to be stuck in bed, you want to be active, you want to meander around, you want to walk, you want to do something. So she goes, there's a stationary bike in there, do you want to use it? I go, yeah, sure. So I started with 15 minutes. Actually, no, sorry, I started with 10. And then we did 15 minutes, and then we did 20 minutes. And I got asked if I rode a bike while I was in there. And they go, so do you ride bikes? And I'm like, oh yeah, mountain, single speed, road bike. And they're like, oh, how far do you go on your road bike? And I was like, usually about 60K on the low. And he was like, oh, okay then, what's the farthest you've gone? I go, in 2 days, I think I went 260 one time. And he's like, okay, so you ride a road bike? And I was like, oh yeah. So after that, I was like, just done. I got logged out of that one within 2 weeks, which was absolutely unreal. And that was also thanks to being able to go home every day and in my own bed. And now last but certainly not least, speech therapy, which is the one I started probably with the roughest beginning. I was screwing up words all the time, some basic words like habit or habitat, like reef or wreath. Similar words in terms of their sounds, but completely different with what they mean. And that was just like, oh my gosh, why do you suck at speaking? So it was kind of a rough start. However, after the first week, I settled in pretty well, thankfully. It ended up being tests and quizzes, but they weren't really like in a hard environment. It was a very just like relaxed, like, here, do this question, here, do this question. It wasn't like, here's a test, figure it out. So some of them were given, say you're in an office and you have to mail stuff, you have to email people, you have a meeting, you have lunch to take, you have to figure out parking for the office, stuff like that. And you have to do it all in one day. Well, what makes the most sense in terms of the order? Something like that. I was given a letter and given 30 seconds to figure out as many words as I could think of that go with that letter. But they couldn't be names, couldn't be places, couldn't be companies, so nothing like official. So if I was given the letter C, for instance, I couldn't say Carol and Caroline and Cedric, but I couldn't, and I couldn't say Canon and Camelback and basically anything related to businesses and brands, but you could say can and can't and canon and stuff like that. Basically words that are more commonly used in speech. Now, one of the funniest games we played, at least I thought it was really funny, was we played catchphrase. And if you don't know what catchphrase is, you're given a name, a place, a thing, something, and you have to describe it without saying it, and the other person guesses it. And we absolutely obliterated that. And that's basically how that class finished, thankfully. So I can play games. So what this whole rehab adventure was all brought together with is psychology. I had testing to do there, which was effectively the release. If you do well on these tests, you don't need to be here, you don't have more to build this way, but we're going to leave you with these things to do to help you rebuild that foundation of your brain, if you will. The testing there covered pretty well everything. Anything related to occupational therapy, the things related to speech therapy, they were both in there. You could argue that physiotherapy was in there too, because some of its testing was based upon reaction times. Now, I don't want to dive into this too much because it's a lot, and I'm probably not supposed to tell you guys that in much detail as it is, but effectively it was, I'm going to go with probably maybe 9 or so tests that, generally speaking, people are given, I think, 5 hours to do, maybe more, maybe less, but we'll say 4 hours to do. I thankfully completed all of it in 3 hours and did very well, apparently, so I was released. The part that sketched me out about that test especially, though, was the possibility of its outcome could have been that my driving license was actually taken away and on hold until doing retesting. That didn't happen, so I got through rehab just fine. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will see you next week where, as you know, we're bumping into the kitchen. But the next video, as far as brain surgery goes, is all the funny stories. I'll see you guys soon.